a very devoted lady who thrilled her audiences with long-legged tap dancing skills. Beautiful and sensational, Eleanor Powell was a genius of her kind in the entertainment circle. She came at a time unique female dancers were very few. She was one star who tenaciously held on to faith in God and humanity. Her exploit on Broadway and Hollywood musicals remained exemplary as one of the most irreplaceable tap dancers that Hollywood has ever produced. Make sure to watch the video until the end, and if you're new here, don't forget to join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Vintage Hollywood Archive channel. If by chance you come across a video that shows Eleanor Powell dancing in one of her hit shows, you would agree that she was among the special breed of dancers that made every moviegoer happy and passionate about dancing. I heard stories of her being a remarkable lady who was more focused on doing what she knew how to do best and growing her career to an enviable height. She was not one of the female dancers who would appear on stage just to compliment their male partners. Powell looks good in what she does, intelligent, and highly creative. Many still regard her as among the most talented tap dancers to have emerged in Hollywood. For the record, Eleanor Powell was an American film actress, an elegant lady, and very athletic. Her dancing was celebrated in the 1930s and up to the 1940s. Fans say her creativity on stage, the quick-fire solo tap dancing practices sold her out as a major hit. She was often seen performing alongside several famous male Hollywood stars of the era, a musical journey that placed her top among the world's greatest tap dancers. Much credit to her rapid maneuvering. Eleanor Powell, who was featured in many Broadway musical films at an appointed time, had to retire from dancing to take care of other issues in her life, majorly raising a family. And of course, she found love in actor Glenn Ford, and the duo were married in 1943. Fans were curious to know why she was leaving the scene when she was still very young and active. Powell told the media that she was made to only dance, 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 and that it was a concern to her because people think of her as a tireless machine that sings and tap dances, rather than a real human being that she is. Everyone was happy that she finally found love after years of career focus, devoid of male distractions and sensual activities. But when that marriage ended years later, almost everyone had something to say about this unique lady. Some said Glenn was disappointed in Eleanor's sexual nature and started cheating almost instantly after their wedding. They fingered Eleanor, being a virgin until she was married, as something that worked against her both in the movies and probably in her marriage. Many say that she carried the idea of no sex before marriage a little too far. One of those morals that those around her knew, including Glenn Ford, as non-negotiable. Some fans accused Ford of having weak morals and wondered if they were attracted to each other. Maybe she thought he would change from the Hollywood lifestyle and be devoted to marriage. At least we now know that Ford was an inconsiderate husband. It seems she fell for a man who betrayed her. Powell held tight to her strong ethic and refused to trade it with the world's corrupt standard. Powell may have been dissatisfied that her marriage did not work out perfectly. That notwithstanding, she was a big star and knew several people with many opportunities to marry, as many men as she would have wished, but for her strong faith. Eleanor Powell was a disciplined actress and dancer, not the sexy kind you will see on a normal Hollywood show. After divorcing Ford, and possibly to support herself, she began a fresh, well-deserved nightclub career. Generations will remember Powell for her highly attentive method of dancing. Fans say she danced her way to success in the golden age of Hollywood movies with her tap dance numbers and musicals. Powell's talent was amazing, whether in vaudeville, on Broadway, or in those hit movie musicals MGM promoted to showcase her dancing prowess. Eleanor Tori Powell was born in 1912, somewhere in Springfield, Massachusetts. Her parents, Clarence Powell and Blanche Powell, separated when she was 2 years old. And under the custody of her mother, young Powell grew up learning and developing strong morals with the help of her maternal grandparents, who were available to instill more ethics and help her develop her personality. Little Powell had all the love she could get, being the only child. Early character traits show that Powell was excruciatingly shy as a child. The king of a little girl that runs into the bedroom to hide when a visitor enters their house or hides behind a window blind so as not to be noticed, and would always shy away from simple things as coming out to welcome visitors that would enter their house. Maybe that was part of the reason her mother decided to expose her to the social circle by sending her to a dance school. She was 11 when she began dance lessons and practically trained within the neighborhood by Ralph McKernan, who also taught other great talents. She was effectively drilled in classical ballet and interpretive contemporary dance, including aerobic dancing. Her natural flair and that beautiful leggy movement sold her out as she captured the interest of many, including Gus Edwards, who runs a vaudeville kiddie review and is today credited for discovering her. Reports say that while she was doing acrobatics on a beach in Atlantic City, New Jersey, the performance was interesting that she got fixed for pay for her show. That was how she began her first professional gigs for Edwards at age 12. Powell's first show was at the Ritz Grill inside the Ambassador Hotel, which she performed during the summer holidays. Her unique acrobatics display made her an instant star in that show. Though with little reward, she continued getting more favorable reviews that would open other significant opportunities. Other paid performances saw her connecting with more featured spots. Everyone, including Jack Benny and Eddie Cantor, show gurus who liked what they saw in her, alongside McNernan, her instructor, would later suggest that Powell move over to Broadway. And in 1927, perhaps on invitation, her mother hauled young Powell to New York City at the expense of her academics. It was a destiny relocation that saw her being signed with William Grady at the William Morris Agency. Although she was able to get jobs as soon as possible that made her a regular nightclub dancer, including dancing in vaudeville and private parties, it seems her impressive acrobatic talents was not the most exciting thing needed for a career on Broadway at the time. This realization made her handlers encourage her to improve towards tap dancing to be saleable as a dancer on Broadway. Powell subsequently registered to be trained in 10 tap dance lessons at the establishment of Jack Donahue and Johnny Boyle, an eccentric method in order to go against her tendency to fall away from the floor and position her feet like a classic ballet in acrobatics. Powell was made to wear an Army extra belt during lessons. The belt had a sandbag fastened to both sides, something designed to pull her weight down so she could feel the floor with dynamism and engage with it as an instrument. Experts say this was created to help Powell find her legs in tap dance and was said to have made her develop her exceptionally grounded and level tap flair. Whatever she learned at school became her only formal knowledge of tap dance. It seems young Powell did not quite flow in tap dance at first and was discouraged, but is persuaded to continue after her initial lesson. She also had something to say about how everything changed, saying that she was still contemplating until the 17th lesson. The dance became interesting for her. It all came together, just like algebra, she had said. You have a tutor teaching you, and suddenly you say, "Oh, now I see." She was quoted. At age 16, she signed up for a tour on the vaudeville circuit, where she shared a bill with the then-famous tap dance duo Buck and Bubbles. And even today, if Powell had been alive, she would still tell you that she was greatly inspired by John Sublett, popularly known as Bubbles. She once recalls, is an intelligent tap dancer. Some say he is the father of rhyme tap, referred for his tricks of bringing tap dance down into the heels and adding sudden rhythms that echoed out of the more anticipated meter of the time. Recall also how Bill Robinson, popularly known as Bojangles, had also popularized an exceptional Irish-inspired tap style, hardly letting the balls of his feet and making it bouncy and floating, while Sublett took his down into the floor, and the pattern is cherished by Powell as it soon influenced her style of delivery, as she was often exhibiting the style. Years later, Powell gave him credit for what he inspired her to do on stage, especially her grounded, syncopated footwork that is today identified as hoofing. In her era in vaudeville, was known as a tap act, tap improviser, or tapping chorus member. Thus, a hoofer would not use their arms, but rather would dance from the waist down while their upper limbs remained free and loose. Powell excited her audiences with the historic dance musical production like Born to Dance, Broadway Melody, and Rosalie, produced between 1937 and 1938, including Broadway Melody of 1940. She took a break from movies sometime in the middle of the 1940s so she could host her Christian children's TV show and put her family life together. As they say, once a soldier is always a soldier. Powell was again on the dancing for the intermittent specialty dance scene in movies like The Thousand Cheer, before she finally halted the dancing after reaching a level she thought she needed to rest her nerve, and sooner. We heard that she was making a new wave in a nightclub performance in Las Vegas. She did not just entertain her audiences with great vigor, she developed a dance style that merged her ballet and acrobatic talents with grounded tap moves. She progressed naturally through fast and difficult footwork, barely exiting the floor and performing tap steps afloat. The double pullback saw her tapping in a hoofing style, with natural loose arms or technically placed port de bras, all of which contrasted with her energetic turning sequences and famous buoyant leaps. Powell's technique and flexibility were outstanding. She added hula to the film Honolulu, which eventually became her choreography like no other. When news broke that Eleanor Powell had died of ovarian cancer as she turned 69, fans wept that they had truly lost a beautiful soul, even though she was no longer performing at the time. Her versatility and influence in early Hollywood musicals is one legacy too many to be forgotten so easily. Everyone thought she lived a life worthy of emulation despite her entertainment fame. Still a virgin at 29, having been brought up under a moral code that she strictly maintained, Powell married Glenn Ford in 1943 in a union that produced a son, Peter Ford. That union lasted for about 16 years before they finally divorced. Powell first met Ford at a party after he made a film with Pat O'Brien. She was on a bombing trip with Laurel and Hardy, James Cagney, and others. It was Pat who introduced them to each other. At the moment Ford saw her from across the room, wearing a lavender cocktail suit, he was smitten. He later described her as having a wonderful figure, gorgeous legs. He had seen her in black and white films, but not in person. So, he said, "I was struck by her coloring, her chestnut hair, worn in soft waves on her shining complexion and stunning cornflower blue eyes were enough temptations that had him quickly agree to take a marital vow. And when she smiled, I was captivated," he had said. When Powell wedded Ford, he was still a young starlet hoping for bigger fame. At some point, she decided to drop her dancing career and focus on her family as the housewife and mother she had become. Little did she know that her husband would betray her. In no time, Ford's career gathered momentum. He became unconcerned about his marital vows, leading to the couple divorcing in 1959. Powell, who was an ordained minister by her church, was often on the Sunday morning television program The Faith of Our Children, teaching and educating society. Facts suggest that with her son's encouragement, she re-established a successful nightclub career after divorcing her husband, even though she made her last screen show in Esther Williams, Duchess of Idaho, way back in 1950. She had a brief task in That's Entertainment in 1974 that renewed her interest. From all indications, her marriage with Ford was not a happy one, and Ford was not happy too, because he was many times caught frolicking with other women in total disrespect of his marriage. It often resulted in quarrels and sometimes physical fights, but she endured for years, hoping that her son would come of age, because she feared that her husband might even claim custody of the boy if she decided to divorce him, since he seems the breadwinner of the family at the time. So, she had to wait until her son was 14, an age he can decide which of his parents he wants to stay with, according to the then California law before divorcing him. When Ford heard of her sudden demise, he told fans that he was shocked and devastated, saying, "First my mother died, then my friend Bill Holden, and now dear Ellie." Eleanor DeBus, who is a close pal, hinted that she died peacefully in her sleep after battling illness for months. Those around her knew that it was just a matter of time before she gave up the ghost with her cancer infection. That was the end of a dance jewel who toured entertainment centers dancing and entertaining humanity, including dancing for the famous Ziegfeld Remarkably Hot Cha, and spending time about 7 years of dancing fame with MGM Studios that made her movie dance sensation of her time. Now, if you're interested in hearing another powerful story about the impact of relationship and scandal in Hollywood, you won't want to miss our next video. We'll be diving into the life of Gail Russell and how her affair with John Wayne ultimately annihilated her.